Welcome back to Inner Peace Better Health. I'm your host, Sayan, and today we're talking about reenactments. So, okay, before that, have you ever caught yourself reacting way more strongly than the moment called for, or found yourself having the same kind of argument with different people in different seasons of life, almost like a deja vu? Or maybe you've worked hard enough to move on from something in your past, but only to notice that same patterns, those same fears, or the same types of relationships that uh, keep showing up again. And if any of that feels familiar, today's conversation is just going to be about that. Yes, we're talking about reenactments, the unconscious emotional loops that guide how we respond, how we protect ourselves, and sometimes how we get stuck. These are the patterns that we repeat, not because we want to, but because they feel comfortable, right? Even when they hurt. And our guest today understands this word better than anyone. Tony Iezzi spent 35 years working inside a major hospital, watching human behavior unfold in its most honest form. And Tony has seen how those histories play out again and again in the present moment. So as you listen, pay attention to the places where something resonates, and because that's usually where the work begins. So, Tony, welcome to the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Totally. So, um, Tony, okay, before we begin, since you have worked decades observing how people respond under stress, I just want to know about how do you define reenactments, in context of everyday life? Because, I mean, this is something that I don't come across often in at least everyday life, but from politics and bookish stuff. So how do you go about that?
Yeah, we could start off with saying that we all have reenactments. We have them every day. We just don't know. We're just not aware. We're just not paying attention. A reenactment is the body, the mind, the behavior's reaction to a given moment. And reenactments are triggered by themes in an incident, in a moment. It contains an idea, themes that a person is picking up on, is sensitive to, but doesn't is not aware. So, for example, a disagreement between two people can contain a theme of bullying, a theme of minimizing someone else, a theme of mistrust, a theme of authority and power. And if someone has a sensitivity to these themes based on life experiences over the course of a lifetime, that's how something minor could be reacted to in a much greater fashion because of that sensitivity. So it's the themes that we're trying to get to tune in to because if we know what the theme is, then we do a strategy that takes care of the theme, not something else.
Mm,
So
mhm.
the problem,
Right.
so the problem is not what happens, it's what the themes are. That's the problem.
So it's like in an analogy. If I have to explain, it's like the white blood cells taking care of the familiar disease that enters your body the second time. It's almost like that, right?
Yes, yes. Yes, and this is a habit, and so you have to learn to recognize this to change the habit and make new habits so that you can handle the situations in a more effective way and feel better about yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like you realize that there's a script. It just changes the way you look at your own reactions. And yep, speaking about that, Tony, that actually connects to what you witnessed in the hospital for so many years. And yeah, I want to come to that because people don't just reenact patterns in conversations. I think they reenact them in their health, their relationship,
Everywhere,
choices.
everywhere,
Which-
everywhere,
Okay.
everywhere.
Totally.
You can have people feel abandoned in an MRI suite. Why would you feel abandoned, with taking an MRI? And well, you could, depending on the person, how they feel, and how they make a read of that situation. So no, it happens all over the place.
Totally, totally. And so from your experience, particularly working in hospital, what kind of patterns did you notice people unconsciously replaying their health or relationships?
It's the usual suspects. The usual themes, the most powerful themes are abandonment, loss, lack of worth. Um, they are lack of love. Not being seen or heard like the way they want to be seen or heard. So these are usually the control, entrapment. That's another one. Feeling trapped in relationships, feeling trapped in a hospital system, feeling trapped in the past. So these themes are common, and that's the task of what you're trying to figure out. One of the things that I've learned in those 35 years, people come through the door, they present a problem, and it's rarely the problem. What they present is the symptom of the problem. Okay. And you have to figure out what the symptoms are. They are the roots. They are the roots of the problems you're dealing with in the present. So for example, we were talking earlier today, men going for surgery, they're short, 5'4", and they want to do an extension surgery on their femurs, and put 6 inches, and so the problem is a lack of height. No, the problem is a lack of worth. But you treat the lack of worth with a surgical procedure. Is that surgical procedure really going to fix the problem of worth? No.
Oh, I
Oh,
love this perspective. I love that. I love how you reframe that. It's just a change in perspective, really, that does the work. And totally, it's totally eye opening how emotional history, right? Or, uh, you know, um, how I think we undermine ourselves in certain situations that can totally influence everything from communication to physical well-being. Because when you really stick with what you're saying, right, it raises a very powerful question that how much of our adult life is actually our adult self, and how much of a younger version of us is still trying to get a need met, right? Maybe, increase your height or whatever that is. And that makes me curious about something deeper, Tony, in your work. Something we don't talk about often is that why do you think reenactment show up so strongly in adulthood, even when people believe that they're moved on from their public?
because
And I think, Tony, to explore that, do we have to talk about or redefine what moving on then means in the context then, in the definition context then?
the you have to remember that if you're 35, you have been 7 longer than you have been 35, an adult. The habit of thinking and feeling a certain way is goes back to usually early in childhood. So let's say the feelings of low self-esteem started when you were 7. Well, you've been dealing with low self-esteem all the way up to 35. That's why it's such a strong habit, and that's why it rules. Another way to think of it is we may be adults, but for a large percentage of time, we're still that child. We're not acting, we're not behaving out of adult mode. We are behaving out of these long standing hurts and wounds that shape us. So when you want to talk about moving on, it isn't just a letting go. It isn't just if you just look forward, this is taken care of. No, wherever you go, all this package goes with you. If you want to talk
Absolutely.
if you want to talk about doing something, you have to do something that's new in the present that creates new habits. So, for example, every time you feel a lack of self-esteem in the past and you dealt with it by keeping it to yourself, you just went and pouted. You didn't say anything. You want to change that habit and start talking to people and say what you think and feel. That new action is going to change how you feel. And so rather than moving on, I'm going to say what's important is to process what you think and feel on. All right. You have to get rid of this stuff. You have to deal with this stuff, you know. But most people would rather come in and say, I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm just not very happy. And that's where they keep it at.
Yeah.
They don't want to have the real conversation and say, I'm really sad because my marriage is not working well. I'm really sad because I've always been made to feel useless and empty and so on. And so if they don't go there, they never move. They don't move on. They don't process. They don't. And that's a lot of us have a lot of stuff in us. And all these bad things, they do bad things for our health. They cause heart attacks. They cause cancer. They cause all these serious medical conditions. So it's important to acknowledge and to work through on these emotional issues. Good question.
Totally. Totally. I mean, so yeah, essentially we're talking about acceptance, I believe, and moving on from something. In other words, I think according, like, this is at least how I see it, is that, we are accustomed to a higher acceptance level in our lives. For example, if we were crying over something that we've lost when we were 15, we don't do that when we're 30. It's just because we are programmed, right, to accept, uh, I mean, those things which now looks trivial to us, but they weren't so trivial back when we were 15, right? And
Oh,
so,
no.
yeah,
And how do you accept the unacceptable?
yeah, that's a great question.
You know,
Um, what? Yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. So I mean, uh, it really depends, I think, on. So if you ask me, Tony, it really depends on, um my healing mechanism. I don't try to run from the truth, right? I embrace that and I heal. So it could be a different mechanism for someone, right? It could be different for someone who is working at a corporate life. It could be different for someone who is pursuing his dreams. So that really depends from the person to person. But I think the key takeaway from this is that we should not ignore what we're feeling, right? We should process the emotions. I think that's also what something you're trying to tell it.
And and engage in new action.
Yeah,
Create
totally.
new behaviors. So
Totally.
if you always swallow the hurt, now try to speak the hurt. If
Totally.
if you go hide in a corner, then come out. You touched on something that's very important. There are two behaviors. You avoid
Totally.
or you approach. What
Hmm.
you want to do is approach, attack it, go for it, address it,
Yeah.
deal with it.
True.
Avoiding
Totally.
just keeps you from dealing with the problem today, and it's there tomorrow, and it's there next year, and it's there next decade. That's what avoidance will get you.
Absolutely. I agree. I agree. I mean, you never actually move on in that scenario. And I think, yeah, you have to attack that, the other side of the coin, and you have to make peace with that. I think that's the first and the most important step in order to really, get out of those patterns. And so, Tony,
You have to be aware. You have to be aware. You have to be aware though of those patterns,
totally,
right? But most
totally.
people aren't. Most people aren't.
First step. That's the first
Say,
step.
first step, yeah, just stay.
Yeah, yeah, and so we are, sort of. I would love to end it on that note that, given your decades of experience on this, what's one misconception that you wish people would let go of when it comes to breaking patterns from the past?
People always want a shortcut. They want the 5 steps to happiness. They want the 3 steps to intimacy. They always want the thing about reenactments, you're never done. You do reenactments until you die. There's a mistake, there's a sense of, and I'll use these words, big words, transcendence and transformation. I work to get to transcendence. But Sayan, what happens the next day when you hit it? If you hit it, life continues. It never ends. the hurts and life having suffering and pain will continue to affect you. You can learn to handle it differently. That's the business about acceptance, and sort of recognizing the good and the bad of life. But there's no shortcut, and the work never ends.
Totally. I mean, that perspective, it does bring a sense of relief and to some degree also, I think, a sense of responsibility.
Absolutely.
For
Yes. Yeah.
ready to change the story. And I think my biggest takeaway from this conversation has been that, like you said, if you have to be aware enough to, understand your patterns first, but our patterns aren't proof that something is wrong with us. I think they're the reminders of where healing is still waiting to happen. And I think that's the most important takeaway that I'm going to take from this conversation.
Absolutely.
Uh,
The one thing I would add is
yeah.
even when you get good messaging from your parents, work hard, go to school, you know, these are good messages. But even good messages can lead to bad consequences, to working to 70 hours, 80 hours a week, can lead to pushing and pushing and pushing, can lead to not spending time with family or kids. Or so it's important that, the life is balanced and to recognize that it's not necessarily that it has to be bad that shapes us.
Yeah, and when you look at that way, I think there's a lot more space to breathe, be in the present. So yeah, I think that's a beautiful note to wrap this up on, Tony. So just curious for anyone who's listening to this and want to get in touch with you, know more about
Sure.
your work. What's the best way to do that? Where can they
Yeah.
find you on?
Yeah. My website, TonyIezzzi.com.
Perfect, perfect. And is that it, or do you want to add more like your apart from your website, apart your socials, or
No,
are you at?
well, I got a book. I got a book. Just so you know, this is where a lot of those ideas are. But honestly, the website is the best place to start because it has pretty much everything on it as a starting point.
No worries. I'll so dear listeners, as you heard, I will be attaching the details in the show notes for you so you can
Great.
check them out
Thank you.
time which one is. And yeah, I think apart from that, this conversation has been such a grounding reminder that reenactments aren't failures, they're literally invitations. And when we finally see the patterns that we have been repeating, we also see the possibility of rewriting them. And I think that's the core message of
That's yes.
conversation today.
Change is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And you should be a believer in that. So for anyone listening, if something in today's conversation stirred a little recognition in you, let that be a signal, folks. Not to judge yourself, but to pause, observe, and choose differently. And you've been listening to NLP's Better Health. I'm your host, Cyan, as always, we are here to remind you that um, this is where inner awareness meets better living. Be sure to follow the show and share in the comments below what spoke to you when you engage, right? This community becomes even more lively and supportive. So thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next, folks. Yeah, there we go. This was wonderful, Tony. Well, thank
Good
you so
job.
much for
Good job. Good job.
I really enjoyed this. But yeah, so a couple of things. So this show will be released in the next 10 to 20 days. But if you could just go on Podmatch right now and mark the interview as complete, I think I could just let Abhi.
All right. Right. Okay. Cool.
So if you could do that now, that would be really great. Otherwise, you can take your time and do that as well.
Okay.
Do you have any questions for me, Tony? Other than that,
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure, Sam.
thank you so much, Tony. Have a great day.